The format for tonight is going to be, we're going to invite all the candidates to give a 2-minute speech. My lovely assistant Isabel is the timekeeper, and so we're going to try and keep it strictly to 2 minutes. Then after that there'll be, because it's organised by the Humanists, and Andrew was the prime mover at the back who put the thing in train. He has had some formal questions on a humanist theme which he's going to ask, and we'll just pass the microphone down, starting at one end and then going from end to end. The answers to that, just keep them fairly brief, no longer than about a minute, if that's okay, guys. And unless there's some point you particularly want to make. Then, depending on time, we'll probably have a break for a cup of tea, and we'll resume after about 15 minutes, assuming everyone manages to get a cup of tea. And then it'll be open season, and you can ask any question you want, as long as it's acceptable. And I gather that in Hove things got unacceptable the other night, so this is Horsham. We don't want to go there. So I'd like to start at random with Morwen, and we apologise for the misprinting of her name. So are you happy to start off with your 2 minutes? Yeah, okay, we'll start.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's great to be here this evening, and good to see so many of you here. As has been pointed out, my name is Maureen Milson. I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. I've lived in Horsham for some 30-odd years. My children went to school in Horsham, and possibly you won't be that pleased to learn that my children also went to Holy Trinity School in Crawley for their secondary education. I wanted to talk a little bit about coalition and why we went into the coalition, and just to remind everyone that when the elections happened in 2010, this country had never seen, or not in living memory really, had seen a situation where nobody knew who was going to be the next Prime Minister. And it was very difficult for a few days, you may well remember, and the media were completely going crazy trying to say, come on, we've got to get on with this, how can we have no government? And actually, generally speaking, countries get on pretty well without governments. I think Belgium went on for about 2 years without one once. So I don't think it's too problematic if it takes a bit longer than the 9 days it took last time. But basically, everybody said everything is awful, Greece is going down the pan, it's all going to come out of the EU, and then the euro will crash, and then the pound will crash, and everybody will be circling. So it seemed to be the right thing to do, to go into coalition. And that's in fact what we did. And we had discussions with both the Labour group and with the Conservatives. And eventually it was decided that it would be a better, more solid, it would be better for the country if we went with the Conservatives. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's James Smith, and I'm the parliamentary candidate for Something New. It's our name, and it's what we stand for. We're a new kind of political party, trying to bring British democracy into the 21st century. Everything's changing, and our institutions are no exception. We're here. We want to build a society that's excited by the future, that embraces change and progress, not one that's afraid of it. By embracing the future and working with it, we can all shape the world we want to see, protect what needs protecting, solve the problems that need solving, and rebuild a sense of community that's been driven out of us over the last few decades. To do that, we've created a political manifesto that's unique. Everyone and anyone, regardless of whether you're a party member or even a registered voter, can add their own policy ideas to it. It's a whole new way of collaborating to build a vision of a better future. It's a vision of society where every citizen can have their say, where everyone's fundamental rights are protected, and where we can make the tough decisions to make sure that our society doesn't destroy the environment it depends on. We know that the public care more than ever about the world, but that our system can't hear together. Do you get all that? Wonderful. Good.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jim Ray. I'm the independent parliamentary candidate. Shirley, my wife and I have lived right here in Horsham for the last 23 years. For the last 4 years I've been a Horsham District Councillor, and since May 2013 a West Sussex County Councillor. So I'm no stranger to our many serious local issues, to government, nor to the bravery required to make difficult decisions. I'm standing for change. I want our next MP to focus his or her efforts on Horsham first, second and third, and Westminster's power ladder last. The theme of my manifesto is that we in this nation must rethink the way we spend our precious financial resources. We must also create fairer tax systems, both personal and corporation tax systems, in order to maximise tax take at their current rates. We must rethink spending taxes in order to properly provide for our citizens and to finally bring under control the ruinous financial legacy left by Labour in 2010. We need an MP to focus on issues at home, here in Horsham, to fight for the successful resolution of those serious local issues. And I know I can do the job if I'm elected next week. Thank you.
Good evening, and once again thank you for hosting us this evening. It's great to give people the opportunity to come and quiz us all. I know all the candidates, well, certainly speaking personally, we appreciate it. I'm Jeremy Quinn. I'm the Conservative candidate for the constituency. I was selected from 100 applicants when Francis decided to stand down. I've known the town for a long time and I'm living now in Tanyard Close, which is fantastic. It's great to be here. And you also, we should say a couple of words about our party. And it's proud to be the Conservative candidate. We firmly believe in a well-supported, well-funded, free at the point of use NHS, a welfare system that works for those in need, fantastic schools, and a strong defence of the realm. But what we also know is to get everything that we want, we need to have a fantastic economy that's really performing. And I'm very proud of the record that we have in government over the last 5 years. A government which has seen the deficit halved, which has seen 1,000 new jobs created every day, and some of the best economic growth of any major developed economy in the world. It's to be able to continue that we're standing we're looking for a mandate now, and to be able to continue to drive that economy forward in order to ensure that we can continue to provide the services that we all want and our people deserve.
Good evening. My name's Darren Green. I am here representing the Green Party for the Horsham constituency. Thank you for the invite, and it's very good to be here. Having grown up in Horsham, I know the town well. I've had previous jobs in Horsham, and I'm a qualified social worker, and I currently work for the County Council in Horsham as an assistant care manager. I'm a seasoned and energetic campaigner on a wide range of issues, from animal welfare to the environment, and I believe I'm able and I'm keen to represent the people of Horsham on the Horsham constituency on issues affecting them, such as the lack of affordable and sustainable housing and the government's austerity measures and the prospect of hydraulic fracturing. I've previously stood as a borough council candidate in Crawley, county council candidate in Surrey, and a county council candidate in a Horsham by-election for the Green Party, and I've been a member since 2004. I believe I'm the right advocate for the people of Horsham because of my political and campaigning experience. As your MP, I would endeavour to work for the common good of all, by defending all public services from unnecessary and arbitrary cuts, defend green spaces, thank you, and the wider countryside from unnecessary development by proposing brownfield site alternatives, defend people's right in the rented housing sector to affordable homes to a decent standard, demand public transport for all, not just for some, that is timely, clean, reliable and affordable, defend local NHS services within the context of them being part of a national service, opposing all hydraulic fracturing wherever it is proposed as being the antipathy of the kind of energy production we should be investing in, renewable energy, and support small local businesses in terms of taxation rates and achieving ecological sustainability. Vote for Green Party of England and Wales and you can help us build a society that works for the common good. Thank you.
Good evening. It's really kind of you to invite us here, and it's a pleasure to be here and speak with you. I would say I've been in Horsham, I suppose, 30 odd years now and raised a family here, and this is my 5th general election. And we've always increased our minority in Horsham. That's a success. We're having a really nice campaign at the moment, and I have to mention we did a hustings in Colliers last week, and some students came up afterwards and asked for could they help, and I was seriously encouraged by that. And on top of that, Malay's school then, the girls have come up, young girls, 15, 16, come up and said, can we help in your campaign? So, fantastic. So much of our political debate is conducted in the spirit of negativity, mistrust and hostility. The Peace Party believes that there is a better way, that people are capable of compassion, kindness and generosity. And it is this belief that informs all our policies. The two areas that bring these ideas into shape, into sharpest focus, are war and poverty. To put it simply, our ultimate objective is to eliminate both these scourges, in the process release vast resources for the benefit of humanity. With your help and the help of other peace movements throughout the world, we could radically improve the situation. The Peace Party recognizes that it might appear hard to adopt a completely non-violent approach to living. However, the examples of the lives of many people, well known and unknown around the world and over time, testify to the rightness of the non-violent way of life. So, have no fear. We have policies. It would go over the 2 minutes, but I would ask you to take one of these on your way out. It would be really kind if you would. Thank you very much.
Good evening, I'm Martin Davies, the Labour Party candidate. Thank you for the invitation, I appreciate it. The Labour Party has always had a strong commitment to investment in science and research and development industries. When we were in power, we created the UK Cell Bank and in 2012, and it was created in order that scientists could use cell technology in an ethical and in a quality control fashion. And over the past 5 years, investment into research and development has reduced by £856 million at a time when our competitors, particularly in France and Germany and Japan, have increased their investment into research and development. And these are important points for the Labour Party, because through science and technology and research and development, that is where huge growth potential for the economy, for future employment is going to come from. And if we keep on reducing that, then we believe the economy will suffer badly. I believe that there should be an affordable housing policy that is managed and imposed upon councils to ensure that local people, particularly in the southeast, have a chance of having a home where they were born and where they want to live, and not separating families as currently is done. The development in North Horsham of 5,000 houses is going to have a huge impact in this area. It is going to import people probably from London and will change the character. But more importantly, the infrastructure and the railways have not been developed to cope with those particular issues. And we believe that that will be a major part of our process of representing Horsham in the future.
Since I'm in the corner, I'm going to stand up so you can all see me. I'm Roger Arthur. I'm the UKIP candidate for Horsham, and I'm a chartered engineer who's been a Horsham District Councillor since 2007. That's 8 years nearly now. And I have been in the Cabinet. I've been the Deputy Leader of the Council. Today, we face a lot of uncertainty. We are being offered goodies from all over the place, while the deficit has increased. Now it's now nearly £90 billion. That's £90 billion more than the government gets in taxes it's spending. The number of jobs has increased, but many of those are low-paid part-time jobs, and they involve in-work benefits. So inevitably, the tax revenue has not risen. We have got a problem, and it is being ignored. The debt will rise to 1,650 billion by 2019. So we need to counter this. There are a number of things we can do. One is we can increase the viability of the private sector, the small to medium-sized enterprises, who employ 25 million people in this country. If we can get them, mobilise them to generate wealth and innovate, we can actually get more into the government coffers. But we've got some mind-blowing losses to deal with. There's 100 billion a year which is wasted by government, according to the Taxpayers Alliance. I want that money. I want it for the poorer people in our society, the people in need. It is being wasted. We need to ask why. Why has that not been dealt with? Our government is hemorrhaging money, while services such as the NHS and the police, the education and defence, along with benefits, are seriously under-resourced. These are services that are on the point of collapse. We have to do something about this. And we can, because we know how to fund it and kickstart the process. And we are not driven by big party donors. And I also want to put you in control of issues such as planning, fracking, airport expansion, through elected representatives, and not by quangos who are unelected. I want to return to government for the people. I want to give hope to the people who are most disadvantaged.
Thank you to all the candidates for their speeches. I apologise for the bleeper. I have that in my kitchen and it goes off every day and it's a pain. But I'll now ask Andrew to, since it is a humanist gig, to ask the first of the formal questions, and we'll just pass the microphone for a brief answer to each, no longer than about a minute. We'll get the bleeper going again. To each of the candidates on each of the questions. Thank you. I'll give you time to...
Thank you, Mark. I'm afraid this microphone makes a bit of feedback, so try to put up with that. These questions were submitted by residents across the county and are a combination of humanist questions, science and evidence-based policy questions. So the first one, do you think we should have a secular government? In other words, one that does not privilege or discriminate on the basis of religion or belief in our public institutions and laws. For example, in schools, parliament, local councils, the NHS and the armed forces.
Thank you for that question. Very interesting question. I believe, and so do most of my colleagues, if not all, that anyone can be of any religion or no religion, provided they are tolerant of others and they comply with the law of the land. People should be able to wear religious symbols or dress without offence, being taken by others, again, within the law. That is my basic position.
I suppose what you mean by secular government, one of the issues involved is the House of Lords. You can't get away from that if you are looking at religious influence. the Labour Party believes that the House of Lords should be elected. And if members of particular religions or no religion wanted to stand for that, including the bishops, then they would be able to stand and be elected to represent. You've got to remember that actually the Christian element, the practicing Christian element in this country is 5%. And so, they would presumably get that kind of representation in an elected house, the second chamber. I've been an educationalist for over 30 years, and I went to a faith-based school when I was growing up. And there are huge, the problems of faith-based schools now have become much more serious. And they've become more serious because not just in non-Christian religions, but within the Christian faith, there are some quite bizarre, extreme sects that are particularly taking hold through the free school network. And they are dangerous. They teach things that are academically and pedagogically rubbish. And therefore, I do have some problems with that, and I think we need to look very closely in the future to how we develop that. And I think that people should have the right to follow a religion, they should have the right not to follow a religion, and they should have the right not to be attacked physically or verbally, whichever view they hold.
I agree with most of that, definitely, if not all. Thank you. So, Nick isn't here, is he? Yeah, we say it on all our literature and on our websites, etc. We are a secular political party. We welcome people of all religions and of none. I think the big problem is when religion, we see it in the Middle East, we see it all over the planet, when religion gets involved with politics, it's toxic. It gets toxic. And so yes, we should have secular government. That's our position on this situation. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for the question. Yes, I believe we should have a secular government, but we also should have, as we do have largely, the freedom for people to practice their religion in a peaceful and inoffensive and unobtrusive way, which the vast majority of people following religions in this country do. But for those who don't, then we need laws, and we have laws, and need those laws to be implemented to stop them from abusing the freedoms that everyone has. So, moreover, the Green Party believes that schools could create greater freedom to recognise religious holidays, cultural celebrations, and secular observations in the school calendar. So part of that sort of freedom to express one's religion if one has one. Thank you.
Thank you. Complete agreement, of course, from us all, in that we're all opposed to discrimination in all its forms. I would have endorsed that. But it'd be very boring if we didn't have a debate at all up here, if we all agree with everyone. So I will take issue with Martin. And I'm not expecting to get a wild amount of applause from the humanists in the audience. But actually, I don't think it harms us one iota to have a head of state who's also supreme governor of an established church who speaks to us and speaks to the Commonwealth on Christmas Day. I don't think that makes any lasting damage to our country. To the contrary, I think it's rather good. And I like the fact that we have bishops in the House of Lords. Again, it's a reminder they bring a perspective and they bring a particular view. It's a revising chamber, the House of Lords. I think it doesn't do any harm. To the contrary, it's rather good that we have them there. And the Chief Rabbi and other representatives who bring a different non-party political perspective. I think that's to be welcomed. And I'm saved by the bell before I dig myself in further, but I believe it's a good thing, and it reminds us of our roots and the value of Christianity still today.
Of course, I totally support a secular government. The idea of a secular government, of course, is that we, the people, elect to Parliament the people that can provide that secular government. And if you think at any point in time that we don't have the right people in Parliament, then it's down to me and you to correct it. The actual question itself, well, of course, I cast my mind back to last week's hustings at Kingdom Faith Hall. I said to the assembled congregation that on my Facebook page I have no religious view whatsoever, but I'm totally tolerant of all others. But I also expect people to show the same amount of tolerance to everybody, to respect everybody's right to their own religion and to their own beliefs. And if those people cannot show that tolerance, then the laws of this land must protect them. Thank you.
So a nice simple answer to this one. Yes, I do, as many of us do. I keep turning it off. I firmly believe in the separation of church and state and think that government shouldn't treat any religion preferentially at any level. The latest British Social Attitudes Survey found that only 17.5% people identify as Church of England and 49% have no religion at all. So we're a very diverse society now, and favouring one religion over another doesn't make any sense. I don't think there's any official place in government for things like prayers at local councils or first thing in the morning in the House of Commons. I think that's an anachronism. I won't. So, I'd rather have an elected House of Lords in some way, or randomly selected, actually, is what we prefer. Schools are an important side, though. In a diverse society, state schools shouldn't promote any particular religion. Parents and communities are completely free to do that. But schools shouldn't promote one over another, and I'll stop there.
Thank you. Like everybody else, I do think we should be an entirely secular country, in spite of my children's attendance at Holy Trinity and my own attendance at St Mark's Church. I don't think that religion has a direct place in government, in schools, or in anywhere else. But clearly there are faith schools. It would take an awful lot of money to undo the current situation, and I think at the moment there are other priorities, so I think they ought to stay where they are and people should be free to send their children to them. But I absolutely think we should ensure that there is a curriculum that includes a proper science-based curriculum with particular attention to evolution and other issues of that type. I do think that the House of Lords should be elected. I think that if it's elected under first past the post, the chances of any bishops being elected are very, very slim. And I also think we ought to question the funding of chaplains in the NHS out of NHS funding. I think if there are going to be chaplains, we ought to consider whether the church should pay for them.
Thank you very much for your replies. Next question. Do you agree that a nation that invests heavily in science benefits the economy massively? If so, what investment is your party planning?
I do agree that science is very important and that nations should invest in science in order to improve the technology that they are operating. And it's important to the economy that we continue to be competitive, and without investment in science and technology we will not be so. Our policy is that we protect the 4.5 billion budget that is currently in existence until the budget is balanced, and thereafter we would double the annual investment from government into science and technology. I think that's it, thanks.
So, yeah, the UK has a long history of innovation and high technology, and the future demands that we keep that up, that we remain at that forefront of knowledge. We support the Science is Vital target of 0.8% of GDP going to scientific research and development, and that's really a minimum. You know, ideally we'd have a lot more. We need to do this in a distributed way as well. Scientific advances aren't the preserve of the largest institutions. Innovation happens at all levels, from start-up companies across the country to our oldest universities. Making sure we invest in communications infrastructure, create technology hubs, science parks, and support small-scale innovation across the country will be essential if we're to make the talent that's out there. And it goes both ways as well. We desperately need more scientists and engineers to engage with our democratic process, because become representatives, and to form a government that truly understands science and technology, because one that doesn't isn't fit for the 21st century.
I note that the question actually asks that does investment actually correlate to improving the economy massively? I wish it did. We have a record of innovation. We have a record of great education in sciences. What we don't have in this country is a great record of keeping up those ideas in this country, the means of producing those ideas into finished articles in this country, and therefore the employment in this country. We only have to look at Dyson. Dyson was quite happy, he's great there, he's a great innovator, but in 2002 they were quite happy to take all that innovation and move the production lines lock, stock and barrel to Malaysia. So yes, if we invest in sciences we will benefit, provided knowledge and employment stays here in the UK.
Well, let's not knock our record too much in this area. I believe I'm right in saying that there are more Nobel Prize-winning scientists working in Cambridge today than there are in the whole of France. So we're clearly doing something right along the way. Like Morwen, we're committed to protecting the 4.5 billion. I think it might be even 4.6 billion budget on R&D. There are various capital projects like the Henry Royce Centre for Advanced Technologies that we are committed to supporting over the next few years. I agree with Jim that it's getting that transfer from pure science, which is inherently good, but pure science into production, which is great. Hence the catapult centres, 11 of them, $1 billion a year, getting scientists and engineers working together. And this starts from the grassroots. Maths is now the most popular A-level to take, which must be good for the long term. There are 75,000 kids embarking on apprenticeships last year in STEM subjects, a 40% increase. So starting from the bottom up also works.
The basic aim of the Green Party science and technology policy is to encourage and to promote research, development and the application of science and technology, which will increase knowledge and understanding, help to understand and address the major environmental threats such as climate change, pollution and biodiversity loss, and contribute to a better quality of life for all of the inhabitants of the world. The Green Party believe that people are naturally curious about the world and enjoy extending their knowledge by scientific study. This research is a worthwhile activity in its own right. Scientific study must not be restricted to that which is deemed likely to result in narrow short-term economic benefit. Science and technology have made enormous contributions to our civilization and well-being. However, irresponsible use of science and technology have undoubtedly resulted in problems for society. We need a new approach.
It's hard to disagree at all with your last comment. And by the way, with James. We live in a technological and scientific era at the moment, and it's the use and abuse of this technology and where it's spent and what is spent on it. But certainly we should advance that, and it should be supported by the government and by business, and not turned completely, I don't know what percentage, towards the military and the complex that supports the military, etc. So I would scrap Trident for a start. And I think it's 100 million, is it? 100 billion? Or maybe 2. Do we know? 100 billion? And counting, yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, I support all what is said positive on the panel tonight. Thank you.
Just start with a slight aside. The reason that Dyson moved its production company to Malaysia wasn't because they didn't like the way in which science was supported in this country. It was because he could get slave labour wages and therefore make more money for everything he does. And if you really want to have an ethical policy, don't buy Dyson, because that way he will get punished for doing that. And anyone who thinks that investment in science does not bring a stronger economy lives on a different planet to me. In this country, 1/3 of all economic output is through the science-based industries. 1/3 of all businesses are based within the science-based industries, and 1/5 of all employment is within science-based industries. So how about we have a really good idea, we stop investing in science, and then we can have a few more people unemployed and a few more businesses out of work. The reduction in the last 5 years in science investment has been £856 million. The Labour Party have a policy which is called Agenda 230 to meet the German and French investment of 2%, up from the 1.79% which currently is.
Thank you. You won't be surprised to hear me say that I agree with James when he says there should be more engineers in Parliament, technicians. We could. 2 minutes. But what I'm making arbitrary targets, we should actually be focusing where the investment goes. And it's quite clear there's some big opportunities out there. If we were to be able to work out carbon capture, then not only have we got, this is for coal-fired power stations, not only have we got 300 years of coal in the ground, but all of the must be about 1,000 coal-fired power stations that are being built around the world at the moment are having a much bigger impact than anything we do on CO2 emissions. We could have a substantial impact on that. We could give the technology away free. Why don't we think of something a little bit lateral? In addition to that, of course we need more engineers and technicians. That's the only way we can generate wealth. We may not do mass production in this country, but we do innovate, and that's what we're good at, and we should focus on that. That can raise our game.
Yeah, I'm just going to suggest that they're just on behind you on that wall there. Gradually getting a bit darker from this end. Ah, wonderful. Okay, sure. Okay, let's skip. If we got one more question, are we having any of these after the break, or going to open questions? Going to open questions. So let's ask the number 4 then. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Well, perhaps 1 minute responses then. Okay. Now, question 3: how can we tackle Islamophobia on the one hand and protect women from Sharia law on the other?
Thank you. I believe this is a very important issue for many people in our country today, and I hope you're not going to restrict us to 1 minute, because I think we will need 2. We might even need more. It seems that Islamophobia, according to the dictionary, is an unreasonable fear. In that context, I suggest that the fear of those that perpetrated the London and Madrid bombings or 9/11 may not be unreasonable. I'm frightened of it. However, if the threat comes from a minority, and I believe it does, and this is very important, then I think we must be able to show to the public that the threat is limited and that it is under control. Otherwise, we will have people trying to take law into their own hands, and we will have sectarian civil war in our country. We must do everything we can to defend against that possibility. We took defensive action in Northern Ireland. We dealt with terrorists without demonising minority groups. We did it then, and we can do it again. This has in turn affected our own perceptions, and we can reduce the apparent threat by being less ready to intervene in foreign sectarian civil wars. I believe that our intervention in foreign sectarian civil wars has increased the number of people who want to do us harm. So this is linked to foreign policy as well as our policy at home.
One way of tackling Islamophobia is for newspapers like The Sun and The Mail to stop peddling the hate that they practice every time they publish a newspaper. The other thing that did not happen in the Northern Ireland Troubles was that the IRA and the UDA were not called Catholic, Protestant or Christian terrorists. And the majority of imams and leaders of the Islamic communities across the world have condemned all those issues of violence that are going on in people's countries and the attacks within the UK. But they still get called Muslim extremists or Islamic terrorists, and it is wrong. Because if you go into certain parts of this country, in London, in places like Birmingham, Manchester, where there are huge Muslim communities, they live peacefully and productively and sensibly with all the other communities. And we need to learn a bit of tolerance in this country, that actually being able to have a different point of view without it being seen as a deadly threat to every individual in this country, because on the whole they're not.
Well said, sir. Total agreement with all that. Again, it must be conflict resolution within the community of the Islamic community here. I don't think they can expect the extremists that Sharia law is going to work in this country, and I don't think it should be on the agenda at all. I do think that as Martin says, the media are very much responsible for the Islamophobia in the country and across the globe. And until that's addressed with the communities, I don't see many of or I don't hear of, or we don't see it, many of the imams and the leaders of the Muslim community actually in conference, in forum, on our media, actually addressing it within their own community. And it's the media that generate the hate. Really, it's a hate. And as this man said, tolerance. Tolerance. That's Gandhi said it. Tolerance is the way towards peace. Thank you.
Saturday, 21st of March, was the UN International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. We need more promotion to tackle discrimination like this. We need to say no to scapegoating immigrants and no to Islamophobia. In Britain, no one should be afraid to practice their religion. We should be engaging with the Muslim and minority ethnic communities, not disenfranchising them from the rest of society. Adopting Sharia law will effectively impose gender apartheid on women. There needs to be a separation of religion from the state and education system in the UK and around the world. It should be remembered that women and members of various religious minorities suffer daily discrimination and human rights abuses the world over. It is crucial that we recognise we recognise the bravery of those that continue to campaign on these issues, often in some parts of the world, risking their own lives. Thank you.
Yeah, I thought it was slightly unfortunate linking the two topics in the one question, actually. And I'm adhere to the Sir John Locke principle that you have complete religious toleration under the law of the land. We've got British courts, we've got English law, and quite rightly, hate crimes can be severely punished and should be. I just think to re-echo some of the points made earlier, the prevent strategy is doing good work in communities and should be supported. And there are, we always, re-echoing actually, but we always hear when something goes wrong, when a family goes to Syria or there's noise about someone going off to do something awful, we hear all about it. We never hear about the hundreds of thousands of people who are totally committed to this country, working hard, paying their taxes, part of their communities, and part of the broader UK framework. And that needs to constantly be reiterated, and I'm glad that the panel has done so again this evening. Jim.
Thank you. Multiculturalism is a good thing for this country. It's good for us, and it's good for those that come to this country. We must be tolerant of their customs, but at the same time I'm a total believer that they need to respect the laws of this land. If we can live and work together, then fine, then we will have a much better society. Now, Sharia law, I don't see any place for Sharia law in this country. Sharia law puts women at the risk of harm and worse, at risk of their lives. And it has no place here, and we must use our laws to stamp it out. I'm sorry if that offends some, but the question is how can the question is how can we protect women, and we'll never be able to protect women if Sharia law continually puts them at risk.
So I'm going to mostly agree with Martin, actually. I think a lot of Islamophobia comes down to misunderstanding and bad reporting. There is this really unfortunate correlation in our media between Islam and terrorism, and it's reinforced at every turn. The only time, as Martin said, a terrorist religion makes it into the headlines is if it's Islam, and that's really, really bad. Terrorists can come from anywhere. No religion or culture has a monopoly on violent lunatics. Tackling that, though, will come from government and politicians not playing up to those headlines. I'm back again. And yeah, as for Sharia law, we have an excellent legal system in this country, and that law is and should be applied equally to all. Sharia courts and legal judgments are not part of that system, and they shouldn't become so.
Is it not this one that's there's a come back? Okay. Is that 100 years ago, Islam was a very peaceful religion. And it has been a very tolerant religion, and everybody has the right to wear what they wish, but I'm puzzled by why Islam has changed in its attitude to female dress. And I think it would be helpful to us if we could actually understand that. Thank you.
Thank you. And the last question before the break, number 4. Should government ignore the available evidence when making policy? For example, reclassification of cannabis, halting the development of nuclear power, making homeopathy available on the NHS. Are MPs under too much pressure to please voters at the expense of good governance?
Well, clearly government should not ignore available evidence when making policy. The situation on cannabis and in fact other drugs, the policy in this country is not working. It needs to change. Cannabis is only part of that. We've had a detailed report that went to the government, and the Home Office has basically thrown it out because the Conservatives in the government were not prepared to look at it properly. This country is supposed to be sensible and look at scientific evidence. We have to look at dealing with drugs in a different way. Equally, nuclear energy is going to be a crucial part of actually keeping the lights switched on. Without it, we are simply going to fall in a hole. It would be great, eventually, if we could turn to renewables only, but in the meantime, we're going to have to keep the nuclear option. Not in terms of Trident. And finally, homeopathy is an absolute nonsense. It clearly should not be funded by the government, and it's wrong that it has been. Thank you.
So, yeah, absolutely not. Far too often our governments don't create evidence-driven policy, but rather policy-driven evidence. And if we're going to find the right paths forward, we have to look at that evidence and act on it. It's a hard path, though. Scientists and advisors have been vilified for suggesting that, for instance, taking ecstasy is less dangerous than horse riding, which is true. Our media, again, a lot of it comes down to media. It thrives on outrage and controversy. And many things that are technically correct will be attacked by those segments of the media that aren't particularly bothered about truth and reason. But it's government's job to make that hard case, not pander to the front pages. Also, though, when government does its own research, it must be ready to be open with that data. I'd love to be able to rerun the economic models, for instance, that the government is looking at when it does the predictions. Try out different things. I'm sure the best economic minds out there could probably fix a few bugs, for instance, because there's always some. And in the worst cases, government actively blocks release of some of this stuff. For instance, the NHS risk register from before the reforms that were done recently. The government blocked that, and that just looks like you're covering something up, and that's no way to run a country.
I'm going to look at the last part of this question. Are MPs under too much pressure to please voters at the expense of good governance? Sadly, far too many of those that we elect to govern us are far more interested in getting returned to what is a well-paid job than they are of actually doing that job properly without fear for their personal or political consequences. They all too often lack the bravery to tell us the truth. Yes, and their decision making is adversely affected by their overriding desire to be re-elected. So, yes, to go back to the first part of the question, on many occasions you will find, unfortunately, our MPs totally ignoring the evidence, because if they followed the evidence they'd be upsetting people, and if they upset people they would not get back to Westminster.
Well, I had a slight wry smile on this question because as a former civil servant, albeit a brief duration, I love the idea that if we just get sensible people together acting dispassionately in a room with all the available evidence, we'd have all the right decisions taken immediately. And unfortunately, I'm not a scientist by background, I'm a historian, so I don't believe that you can so easily stumble across the truth. And even if you do believe on one particular area of policy, you definitely have the right answer on this one, there's bound to be consequences flowing in other directions. It's always more complicated than the simplistic arrival of evidence can sometimes suggest. Not always, but quite often it is. And therefore, we have to have people taking decisions on behalf of the people. That's what democracy is all about. And even, I know people are very jaundiced in the post-yes Prime Minister world, that there are technocrats out there who run the place. They don't. They always want to have a steer and a lead from people who are actually accountable, who have that mandate. It's great that we have people going ahead of the curve, like Wolfenden. That's a fantastic thing to be able to do that. But ultimately, if one's epitaph as a politician is that you always try to do what your electors wanted you to do, that's not a bad epitaph to have for a politician.
No, government shouldn't ignore available scientific evidence to develop policy, but public opinion should equally not be ignored. In a democratic society, it's about a balance, I believe, and I think that a properly elected government with a properly managed electoral system could deliver a properly democratic government to develop policy between public opinion and scientific evidence, and that common sense, I think, should dictate that should be possible. And yeah, that's what I believe. Thank you.
Yes, on the reclassification of cannabis, I think it should be decriminalized as soon as possible. That's my own personal point of view and many others that I know. I think it's the use and abuse of the cannabis and how people, they haven't got the information on cannabis, and the amount of money that's spent in the national health on alcohol abuse is astronomical at the moment. And I think the nuclear power should it should be a greener it should be a greener policy on nuclear power. I'm against nuclear power. I'm for the green energies. Making homeopathy available, whatever if people want to do it, but I don't think it should be on the national health. I think it should be supported. I think it should be down to the GPs to hand over to the homeopathy community. And yes, sorry, and too much pressure, please, voters, at the expense of good government. I'll pass that over.
I think when the last part of the question, when is there too much pressure to please the voter from politicians, depends how you look at it, really. You know, if you elect a Conservative councillor and end up with an independent one, it's a bit of a shock, isn't it? So, you know, you've got to be quite careful about how you look at that. Now, as far as the reclassification of cannabis is concerned, cannabis has changed as a drug. There is now a heavy influence of skunk, which is seen as most people as a different type of drug. And one of the issues about how the government did the classification, and it was our government, so, you know, criticising that, was actually they didn't separate skunk from cannabis, and skunk should be a Class A drug because of the danger. There was huge pressure from the Somali community to make cat an illegal substance in this country because of the danger and the damage it does. If you take cat for too long, it effectively destroys your intestines, and there are a number of cases of young girls of 16, 17 being put in that situation. And so yes, you can look at some of the scientific evidence. I have to say, the report that was rejected on the legalisation of cannabis by the scientific group from the government that published it was really political nonsense. You cannot just legalise drugs because people take them. Otherwise, my background my academic background was law. Otherwise, you might as well decriminalise murder and anything else because people do it. The drugs, skunk and cannabis should be separated.
Thank you. Winston Churchill once said that people often fall over the truth, but pick themselves up and carry on as if nothing had happened. Well, this often seems to be the case. We have MPs who asked a year or two ago if they would be prepared to receive training on data analysis to help them make better decisions. They, of course, are driven by their political career ambitions and the party whip. So, but there is a solution to that, and that is to get a leader who will insist on decisions being based on proper holistic analysis. I know that's difficult, but really there's no other option. So I've come to that conclusion. That applies locally and nationally. We have seen many examples of the law of unintended consequences, the latest one being the promotion of diesel vehicles some years ago because of their lower CO2 emissions, only to find that they're too dangerous to people. And then we had the Germans shut down their nuclear power stations because of a remote tsunami event in Japan, in a 40-year-old power station, which relied on forced cooling. As a result, that country is now emitting much more CO2. We need intelligent politicians who've done a job in the real world.
Well, thank you all very much. I thought it was very insightful into the various beliefs and attitudes of the candidates. We're going to take a 15-minute break for a cup of tea and a drink, and then we'll reconvene for some questions from the floor. Thank you. It's not necessary to be serious, I'm sure. Okay, especially how we manage this. If you have your questions ready, Andrew is going to provide the microphone. I think generally the microphones do work if you hold them straight in front of you, like that. But they have been unpredictable. Yeah, absolutely. Might be just better to shout. Apologies that they're unpredictable. I think people probably want to address their question to one person, and then anybody else on the panel who wants to pick up on it, they can. So if you have a question, address it to either the whole panel or one in particular. So to kick things off, since I've got the microphone, I'm going to ask a question.
Democracy rules okay.
Absolutely, power. I'd like to ask the panel generally. How does your attitude to immigration differ from the other parties, or what is your attitude to immigration, and how do you think it differs from the other parties? We start off with Norman.
Thank you. My party's view on immigration is that it's all towards me, like that. Okay. It's a good thing. This country has always been a welcoming country. We've had a proud record on giving people refuge when they come here as a result of war and problems elsewhere in the world. We have actually been generous, and I'm appalled that we're ceasing doing that now. And I think, again, it's partly to do with media, it's partly to do with certain parties who are whipping up a certain amount of aggro against people who come to this country. So I think, as far as the Liberal Democrats are concerned, we would like to make sure that we know who's here, and I think that exit checks as well as entry checks are important. But I think we ought to be able to come up with a system where people can be welcomed into the country.
Yeah, likewise, I think immigration is a very good thing for this country. We get a lot more from the people that come into the country than that we give to them, as some parties would have you believe the other way around. And things like, we hear a lot about things like health tourism and benefit tourism. Those things really don't actually add up as actual problems. So there is this distinct thing going on with the media and with certain parties at the moment where they are driving the debate, and they're driving the other parties with them who don't have the nerve to stand up and say that actually this is a benefit to Britain, and it's dragging our entire public debate in, I think, a very unpleasant direction that I find deeply worrying.
I'll try and hold this correctly. As my manifesto says, I'm a believer in multiculturalism, which obviously means that I'm a believer in immigration. But at the end of the day, I'm not blaming immigration for our ills. Our ills came from a different source. But at the moment, we have a problem providing for everybody properly in our nation. So we need to think differently. How can we balance the numbers up? I'm not a lover of the EU and the EU passport. I would always want us to go back and renegotiate where we are in Europe, back to being a trading blockage where we came in 1975. Trading bloc and cooperation and not a federal Europe. If we got back to that situation, if we got back to the British passport and not an EU passport, I believe that we could achieve that balance in terms of the numbers in our country. Thank you.
Actually, some common ground with James and with Morgan. We owe a great deal to many who have come and settled here, who have added to the vibrancy of our economy and of our society. But you can have too much of a good thing. And I fear that when we're going through years of 250,000 plus coming in, it's quite difficult to plan for, and same as the city of Southampton. And that was beginning to stretch things. Our objective is to have immigration in the tens of thousands rather than 100,000 plus. There is a reason why people wish to come here, which is the divergence in our economies. The UK economy has been performing incredibly well, and people, for good reason,
want to come here and take up jobs and help and join our economic success story. But we do have plans to be put in place, which we believe will be reducing the number of people seeking to come to the UK. So I'm not against immigration, but I do think it needs to be controlled and measured and appropriate.
Yes, the Green Party believes in the positives of immigration and the positives of being within the EU and having free movement of people, goods and services. And that principle is one that we do stand by. The problems with immigration are largely around housing and employment. Those issues, they need to be managed fairly. If you manage them fairly, then you take the heat out of the issue of immigration. And so that is the way that the Green Party believes, I believe, would not completely resolve that situation, but it would help it. And it's not just about being fair, but being seen to be fair, and practicing that fully and equitably. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.
I don't think immigrants are not the problem. They enrich our culture and our economy, and we should welcome and celebrate them. There must be compassionate and just policies on asylum and migration. Peace Party recognizes that the political, social, and economic circumstances leading to people to leave their homes are partially caused by the imbalances in wealth in Europe and beyond. The Peace Party will work to maintain solidarity among the peoples of the world, continuing to reduce and eliminate the inequalities between people, and thus, reduce the need for migration. In the view of the Peace Party, major movements of people represent the failure of governments to train sufficient people to serve in roles for which the country has a need and ensured people are paid a living wage. Common humanity requires that the world community must be constantly working to eliminate the factors that cause people to leave their homes. Thank you.
A word seems to have disappeared from the media over the last few years, and it's called refugees. There is a huge difference between somebody who wishes to come to this country as an immigrant and somebody who wishes to come to this country as a refugee. Most refugees actually would prefer to stay where they were. And for political leaders in this country to say that with the boat people, for example, we should allow them all in and then send them back to where they came from. That is a death sentence to some people, and we should understand that. And we have had a proud history of refugee assistance, and we seem to be losing it. As far as immigration is concerned, immigration is only a problem for those areas that don't have it. For areas that have it, like London and Manchester and Brighton to a certain extent, they encompass it, and it adds positively to their community. It also, immigration is a net contributor to the economy, and if you took all of the overseas staff out of the NHS, for example, the Tories would have their way and there wouldn't be an NHS. If you took all of the immigrants out of the majority of service industries, we wouldn't have a hospitality and catering industry in this country, and that is the largest employer in this country. We should be protecting our reputation. We should be encouraging academic students to come to our universities. The clampdown on student visas in this country has cost the universities in London alone £2 billion, and we are losing. We have created a brain drain all by ourselves, and we are suffering for that academically.
For many years we have taken people in under different circumstances. Some of them have been refugees, some of them have been economic immigrants. But in recent years, of course, the rate at which the immigration is taking place has gone up. And there are two issues there. One is obviously there is a limit to how many people you can get in this country. Maybe somebody here will give me a figure. Is it 90 million? Is it 100 million? If we had planned for this and we built the houses, that would be fine. But we get every year a need for another 100,000 houses because people are coming in. Now that's fine. We don't want them to live in tents. We don't want them to live in garages. We need to provide houses for them. If you look at the government's figures, you will not find the 10 or 20 billion a year that's needed to house those people. If we're going to do it, let's not close our eyes to the fact that it's costing us money, and let's put that into the budget. But when we take people, we need doctors and nurses, and we're going to continue to need them for a long time to come because we are not training our own people, and we're leaving people on the scrap heap. And I don't believe that's right. It's also not right because we're taking people from other countries and they could hardly afford to lose them. We have got to get this balance right, and it's a question of balance. It's about control, not uncontrolled immigration.
Thank you. That seems to be a certain level of agreement there. First question, sir. Yes.
Hello there. Good evening. My name's David Hyde. My question to the panel it's to everybody. Right. In the event that you are elected and our representative, what will be your stance on making Horsham a living wage town? And what will you do to encourage living wage employment in Horsham?
Thank you. I personally support the living wage. We had a debate at County Council a few months ago, and I voted in support of a living wage. I think we've reached a point in this part of the world where it's actually impossible for people to survive and thrive, and certainly to have a family, unless we pay more. And unless we can do that, then we are basically stitched up completely. How would I promote it for Horsham? I think, first of all, it would be good if West Sussex and Horsham District Council were to take a lead. And I think we need to promote it across most of our businesses. Our biggest problem is the care sector. And unless government is able to find additional funding, I don't know how we can improve the level of pay in the care sector. And in actual fact, it is criminal that we are paying care workers so little, and particularly that we're not allowing them to be paid for their travel time from one place to the next. And unless we can sort that out, we are going to have real problems in looking after our older people in the future.
So, in terms of making Horsham a living wage town, I think we need to make the whole country a living wage country, really. The minimum wage needs to be a living wage, and it needs to be tax-free, so that if somebody is working, then they're earning enough to live. And that's across all businesses, all branches of government. I agree government should be taking a lead in this. Obviously that is a whole load of money to find, but it is the right thing that we should be doing. But yeah, I think it's got to come from the top, really. We'd like to see that devolved to various to the sort of regions around the country, so that the living wage is set for the living wage in that area. The living wage in London is massively higher than it is even here, but in Scotland or other parts of the country. So we would set that appropriately across the country.
Here we come back to my favourite old subject, money. And back to my mantra, we've got to think about different ways we spend our precious financial resources. I have no wish to pick fights with people, but do we really need Trident, an upgrade of Trident, and the billions that's going to cost? Do we need to waste money in other parts of our sector particularly? My hobby horse, of course, is the fact that there's £1 billion in the life of a single parliament up for grabs if a government grabs the opportunity for presumed consent in terms of organ donation and transplantation. Those numbers don't come from me, they come from a government's own expert. Now, if we can free up that kind of money and make that money available, then it is that a living wage could be possible. But at this present time, we've got to make some very hard decisions, some very brave decisions as to where that money can be sprung from and where it can actually then be used. Thank you.
Clearly there is a reason why the minimum wage is where it is, and every time the Low Paid Commission has recommended an increase, the coalition government has endorsed it. There's another increase coming through in the autumn. I'm very sympathetic to the principle of a living wage, which reflects the real cost of living for many people who are in employment around the country, particularly here in the southeast. I do admire what Boris Johnson's done on this. He's been very proactive in talking to private enterprise and major employers in London, in encouraging them to pay the living wage, and using that as a mark of quality of employers, to say, look, this is what we do. We care for our staff. We wish to pay the living wage here in London. So I'm not in favour of compulsion, clearly, but I do think if we can encourage employers to be as fair as they possibly can be to their employees, and where possible to ensure that their lower paid employees are employed on a living wage basis, that is surely something to be encouraged, and I would wish to do so personally.
believe the the living wage should not just be for Horsham, but it should be rolled out across the country, and should have been a long time ago. The living wage has been established for a few years now. It's not something new, and its implementation properly is long overdue. You can obviously start with government and local councils and public bodies and so on and so forth, but it should be law, as is the minimum wage, which of course is now insufficient in so many ways. Even the living wage is not going to get people. Some people rented accommodation, never mind a mortgage, but you have to start somewhere. So I think the implementation of the living wage across the country has to be a start and as a minimum. Thank you.
As has been said, it should go right across the country, and 0 hours should be done away with completely. It should, it only encourages people to go to, what is it, Wanga Wanga for more money and get wound up and get into debt, and a lot of people ending up on food banks, etc. So, yeah, it should be a living wage so people can afford to live. It's not rocket science. I think it should come down from the government, and it should be made legal. It should be in legislation. Thank you.
The Labour Party's policy is that the minimum wage should go to £8 an hour immediately, raising up to £10 an hour incrementally. And that, we believe, is a start. But there are other issues. If you want to really encourage employers to pay correct wages, then you publicly shame those who don't. Those who, for example, use gang masters to get extremely cheap employment, particularly in the agricultural industry. We should be making much more of a point about that. Now, the issue about and 0 hours contracts, of course, they're almost immoral in the way that they are produced. But of course, if the Conservatives get in, one of the things that they don't like are employment tribunals. So staff who are treated badly by employers can go to the law to get some assistance through the tribunal. They want to take that away. And that will mean that those employers who do underpay, there will be no recourse for their employees to recoup that. As far as the care sector is concerned, the reason care sector staff are paid so poorly is because the coalition government, which included the Liberal Democrats for most of the time, actually have reduced the amount of money that is available per client, per patient, to be supported. So you're now getting most care workers visiting their clients, domiciliary care workers visiting their clients for 10 to 15 minutes at a time, at which point they're supposed to make sure they're okay, make sure that they are clean, make sure they are fed, and they have something. Of course that's not going to happen. What the CQC, the Quality Care Commission, has said is that within the next year, that will reduce to 10 minutes, and we need to look at that very, very seriously.
Thank you. I think any successful employer who wants to continue with his business wants to keep his staff, and clearly he wants them to be, as happy as he can make them. Otherwise, they disappear. In fact, that's one of the problems we have in the National Health Service now. But it's not just the pay, which needs to be increased. It's also the box ticking, policy that's being run by the government. There's been far too much government interference. Now, there are various ways of killing this cat. I mean, there are 8 million people on in-work benefits, part-time, that sort of thing. Now, if those benefits were taken away and all of the costs involved in managing the tax and the benefits were taken out, employers would be able to afford to pay the minimum wage without any increase on the burden on the taxpayer. And I would also suggest that a reduction in national insurance up to the minimum wage would be part of that equation. but there is £120 billion a year in tax avoidance, and I think we should be using some of that in order to fund this. We should be seeking to raise everybody to a living wage. We need to expand, obviously, the small and medium enterprise economy as well, because that will generate wealth, which will also provide more funding so that employers can afford to pay.
Thank you. This lady at the front.
Thank you. We've got a housing crisis in the southeast of England, and it's particularly acute in relation to social rented housing in Horsham. And I've heard from many of the candidates who've supported that we need to do something about it. But we have to recognise that it's a local council and our local politicians that have a real job to do and a responsibility for delivering social rented housing. Some of the comments that were made in relation to a proposal for a social housing development in our area only this week were absolutely appalling from our councillors. They referred to ghettos, they referred to prisons, they referred to social cleansing. Now that suggests to me that there is a resistance to providing those homes that we desperately need. Now, Martin suggested that it should be the role of the central government to ensure that those homes are delivered. Can you tell me what you think about that proposal in terms of making sure we get the homes that local people need?
Yeah, I have done a lot of work on trying to get the MPPF, the difficulties of the MPPF, which is of course a doubling of house building on greenfield land without substantially increasing the amount of affordable housing. It's quite clear to me that you will not get the affordable housing based on commercial building rates. It just does not happen. It will not happen. So we have to find some money to fund affordable houses. As much as I dislike the idea of having to raise more money, but I've already given 2 or 3 examples. I mentioned the tax avoidance, 120 billion a year. I mentioned 100 billion a year in wasted money, government money. I haven't yet mentioned the 80 billion a year in quangos, including the planning inspectorate, which overrides our decisions and charges us to do it. There is money there, and we need to use it to build affordable houses. There is absolutely no question about that.
When Labour were in power, they developed a policy that actually worked quite well as far as planning was concerned. The one thing that we must ensure does not happen to protect the social housing that we have is that we must make sure that the right to buy policy does not occur. Because if we allow that to occur, what happened under Thatcher will happen again. And what the right to buy policy under Thatcher is part of the reason, a major part of the reason why we're in the situation we are now, because they weren't allowed to rebuild. And what housing associations are saying, who will be affected? Who will be forced to sell houses at below market value against the mortgages that they already have taken out on those will mean that a very large number of housing associations will go out of business. And that is a disgrace. Now, when you have local councillors calling social housing ghettos, it is disgraceful. They talk about how they want to help those people in social housing, and they then vote against social housing. It's a little bit like on their policy where they talked about the football club. They wonder why the football club hasn't got a ground anymore. They forget to tell you they voted against it, and that's why they haven't got a ground anymore.
I agree with Martin on this. Absolutely. Social housing has been ignored and pushed aside, and I agree that Council's comments are a disgrace. And there's not enough social housing. The developers and the Council and the powers that be collude, I do believe, and do not just support social housing. They don't deliver any of it. It's a tiny percentage, and it should be addressed seriously. And You put me in the council chamber and I will ask the questions. Right. Thank you.
As I understand it, the last Labour government's attempt at house building in 13 years was about as bad as this government's has been in 5. So I don't see that voting for any of these 3 parties, when they failed to do it the first time round, will result in a better effect the next time round. You're just going to get more of the same. The problem with housing is the number of landlords sitting on available land waiting for the price to go up and not releasing it to developers to enable that housing to be built. And we need laws to ensure that that does not happen for any length of time, to ensure that a housing need can be met. And there's just no incentive on the part of the past 2 governments to address that, because they don't want to be doing anything to counter the profits that these landowners want to make. They're in the pockets of the landowners, and we need a government that reflects national need for the people, not for the minority of landowners.
Just to come back on Martin, housing associations won't go out of business. They are going to be compensated. There will be, that policy enables people giving, enables people, come and have a go, it enables people to have the right to buy a home that they've lived in for many years. That is a good thing. And I would like to congratulate anyone who's in the opportunity to was able to take that opportunity and able to buy their own home, which they've lived in for many years. It is a good thing. But I've been involved in homelessness for a long time. I've always taken interest in it. Of course we need social housing, but in direct answer to your question, no, I think that's something which does need to be taken locally rather than from on high, from Whitehall. So I think it's a matter for local people. Jim.
Thank you, Jeremy. I've just come to the end of a 4-year term as a Horsham District Councillor, sitting in the council chamber, planning night after planning night, trying to decide and gain social housing on just about every planning application possible. I know how hard it is. I know we're not achieving the goal that we set ourselves. So, and I say this with all respect, due respect to Jeremy sitting next to me, the government's proposed policy of the right to buy is the daftest piece of idea that I've seen in a very long time. It's totally counterproductive. It goes against everything that we have been here trying to do in Horsham District for the last 4 years. Now, to try and grab and capture social housing for rent, there is a role here for West Sussex County Council through its PropCo initiative, where it wants to use some valuable West Sussex County Council assets, which it then liquidates to cash, to reinvest in that market for the benefit of the people of West Sussex. That is where I will be putting my support and my effort.
I won't reiterate a lot of what everyone else has said, but yes, we need more social housing, and we need to be looking at housing not as an investment, but as a utility that people have a right to. Everyone wants social housing, but nobody wants it near them, it seems, and I think that's something that has to change. Well, yes, all right. Not okay. Everyone is wrong. Councillors on off is what I meant. But I want to talk about a couple of other things. One is why everybody's priced out of the housing market anyway. So where has the enormous inflation in house prices come from over the last 20 years? A huge amount of this has come from the fact that banks, when they create mortgages, they come out of thin air. The money doesn't come from anywhere. They have to keep a small amount of it in reserve, but essentially banks are printing money. We have laws against printing money. But if you do it electronically, there aren't any. We need to look at that. We need to reform that. And the other point I want to make is that everyone receiving housing benefit, living in private rented accommodation, they don't get that money. There are a lot of private landlords out there who are making a huge amount of money off the state. And that money could be going back into our councils. There was a party, I can't remember which one it was, whose communication officer is earning something like £800,000 a year from housing benefit paid to people renting his accommodation. So I think that needs to change.
Thank you. Well, I think, first of all, I strongly believe that the sale of council houses in the 80s was wrong. I think it was especially wrong that councils were absolutely forbidden to replace that housing stock. And that has caused us immense problems ever since. I think it was wrong then, I think it is wrong now, and I think it will always be wrong to sell off social housing. I think the other thing I would like to go back to is a county structure plan, because the county structure plan, which was done away with, it was a southeast plan which was cascaded down to county plans. There was a number that was dished out by central government, and the Labour government did away with the southeast planning and the county structure plans, and that has not helped in terms of creating proper planning for the whole county. So I'd like to go back to that, as opposed to just government telling everybody what's to happen. I think it was a framework, and I think it worked quite well. And I would like to go back to that. Finally, regarding the particular site that was raised in the question, it is a very congested site. It's sustainable because it's close to the railway station, but there are massive problems in terms of it's adjacent to another site that has already been developed, and it has had no time to settle and for the community to gel and to mesh. And I think that the intensification of this other site was over intense.
Okay, I think we've probably done that one to death. Any more questions from the floor? One here. I think we've probably got time for maybe two more, I think. So, gentlemen here. I think if we now limit to about 30 seconds, because I want to be... Two more questions, 30 seconds each. So, yeah. I know that Jim's got issues to get away.
Hello, good evening. We've talked about pressure on housing. Now, I think there's a good reason that it comes from immigration. And I agree with what the Conservative candidate said, that we need to limit immigration because it increases pressure on housing. It feeds, for immigration into the country, at 350,000 net a year. It's a major factor. It needs a lot of housing to support that. And that pressure comes down to us. We're already a high density country in terms of population per square mile. Unfortunately, the Conservatives in the last Parliament have not tackled this. They've only tackled immigration from non-European countries. They've not stood up to Europe. They've not proposed anything effective in the last 4 years, which is a lot of water under the bridge. We don't know explicitly what they're going to do in the future. They may still fail to solve this problem. And on housing as well, because of the pressure on housing, it pushes house prices up. So what does the government do to try and sort this out?
Yeah, I think
we
need a sort of direct question that they can respond to. It seems to be a series of statements at the moment.
It is, but I think they understand the background. The Conservatives have put in policies that help people to buy, and even recently they're doing this. But all it does is puts the price of houses up. Houses is a supply and demand situation. So increasing the demand, but they're not.
Yeah. Well, I agree.
If they're effective immigration, they'll reduce.
Yeah, I think it's a series of statements. There's two more questions at the back here. This gentleman in the red T-shirt. So, sorry to cut you short, but there wasn't really a question that I could identify, honestly.
I'll get straight to the question.
What was the question? Okay. Do you want to quickly respond to that?
Yeah, I just have to reiterate that we do not discriminate between people of different religions. I am quite sure that we will not, I certainly will not discriminate between different people. If there are refugees out there, their lives under threat from torture or whatever reason, then they should be allowed to be considered to come into the country against the UN rules, against the UN agreements.
Yes, if we have a majority Conservative government, which I sincerely hope we will. You do surprise me, sir. I thought you were a closet Tory underneath. I really did. You get every. I know you're my biggest cheerleader. Welcome to join us anytime. If we get a majority Conservative government, and I sincerely hope we will. There will be a renegotiation about our position inside the EU. There is a raft of measures that we have in mind to help reduce the flow of migration from the EU, mainly related to welfare, one's ability to claim in-work benefits as well as out-of-work benefits. But given that I've got 30 seconds and we've already had two questions, I think I'll leave it at that, sir. But you're welcome to talk to me later if you want more further details.
I'm surprised that we're just concentrating on the word immigration, because our problem here in London, the south and the southeast, does not simply arise from immigration, but from migration in addition to that from other parts of the UK. It has been government policy for at least the last 50 to 60 years to centre the economic durability of the UK on London and the South East. That is where our housing pressures come from. That is where the pressures on all our water facilities, our airports and everything else. We need to reverse the government policy. We need to effectively create the powerhouses of Manchester, not simply in words, but we need effectively to reverse migration from other parts of the UK to the South East.
Okay, time for one more.
Yeah, just a very quick question. Government forms, bane of my life. If your party gets into power, what will you do to simplify the forms in the respect of, I'll give you an example, the disability living allowance form for children? I've got it right here, and I know you have to be thorough, but it's 74 pages long. Surely that could be reduced. That's my question. What will you do to reduce it and simplify those forms?
I think basically we need to actually get in there and say these forms have got to be shortened. There's no other way to do it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the number of sheets of paper that come with from any government pension bit, or my mum's on supplementary benefit, and she gets reams of paper every time it changes. And she says, what am I supposed to do with it? And I read it all and I say, actually nothing. It's just, you've just got to tell them if your circumstances change. And it's absolutely insane, the amount of paper that's wasted.
Yeah, on DLA especially, if you've never filled in a DLA form for your 1-year-old daughter, then yeah, that's a very unpleasant experience. I'm going to be nice about Francis Maud now. Actually, I think the work that he has done in digital transformation of government service delivery, of things like that, online delivery of all of that, and transformation of civil service, I think is really good. He may not have been always here as a local MP, and so we should probably separate those jobs, I think. But the work that he's done with the government digital service and doing online delivery of those things is it's definitely a step in the right direction for all of that, I think.
Being somebody, of course, who has first-hand knowledge of filling out DLA forms for a very sick wife, and I'm with Morwin. We've got to get in there. These forms are stupidly long. They're needlessly intrusive. We simplify them. I'd like to see these forms reduced from 74 pages to no more than 5 or 6. Literally, those are the key. We need the key questions answered. At the end of the day, if the powers that be want to prove anything, at the end of the day, there is the medical examination and the medical requirements to go through. We don't need a 74-page form.
That seems to be common sense, and I'm certainly aware of situations where it's been so complex that people have had to come out from the DWP to help people fill in the forms, which just seems complete waste of manpower, having people deployed in that way. There is I haven't got a magic wand in terms of the forms. I mean, I'm sure it's done with the best of intent, and the best of intent is to ensure that those who really need the support get the support. So I don't think it's with any evil intent. No one sits there to say, let's see how complicated we can make these forms. But anything that can be done, and James is right, anything that can be done to make it easier and more transparent so that those in need can claim the easiest way possible should be encouraged.
The problem, I believe, is people, bureaucrats, sitting in offices, coming up with these ideas for these forms and not really knowing what the real world is like. So what we need is a public consultation for issues like this, where people who have to fill in the forms are the people who advise on how those forms should look. And there's a whole range of public officials and various agencies and charities who can all sort of chip into that public consultation and feed into the process as to what these forms should be like and how the wider service should be configured.
I think it's all been said along the panel here. It has to be shortened, save a few trees, at least a little bit of rainforest, and it's just common sense, isn't it? I mean, they are very complicated. I've had occasions to do it in the past, and it's this thick for the disability living allowance for my wife, and yeah, it should be completely shortened. How, I don't know, but I'm sure there's lots of people who would know, right? I don't know how it can be done. I'll pass it to this man. I'm sure he has the answer.
Thank you for that. There is. It obviously must be shortened. The forms must also be relevant to the people who are filling them in. And if you have got learning difficulties like severe dyslexia, for example, you are immediately at a disadvantage before you start even opening the form. And there should be more online availability, but also bearing in mind that there are some people who cannot use online facility. I think probably, off a little tangent here, that if the Conservatives or the Liberal Democrats get back into government, there won't be so many forms because there won't be any benefits being paid anyway.
I think there are two key reasons behind this, and of course, unless you identify the reasons, you can't resolve the problem. I think one of the reasons is there's too much government meddling. They're introducing arbitrary targets. Once you've got an arbitrary target, somebody's got to report against it. So somebody's got to collect data. So who collects the data? Well, the Quango does. Now, unfortunately, we've still got a lot of Quangos, something like 750 Quangos, when 250 were supposed to have gone. There's only 30 have gone. So we've still got these Quangos there demanding that people fill in the information. The Quangos cost, as I said earlier, £80 billion a year. So there's a double benefit here. You get rid of the Quangos, you'll get rid of the red tape, and you'll get rid of £80 billion a year.
I think the general consensus was that we were going to actually finish about this time. I know that Jim's got to disappear in particular, and I think the candidates are getting quite exhausted by these things. Thank you very much for coming, and we could probably go on all evening. Thank Isabel for her timekeeping, and the ladies for doing the drinks as well, and Andrew for putting it together. And thank all the candidates very much for their time.